I was using my husband's phone when I saw the text. Operation starts Friday. Make sure she doesn't suspect anything. Friday was tomorrow. My hands shook, but I stayed calm. I pretended everything was normal, and on Friday morning, I woke up early and did something that made them all freeze when they walked in. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. He always left his phone face down on the kitchen counter, a habit I never thought much about until that Thursday. My own tablet was updating, and I wanted to check a recipe for the lemon tart I planned to make for the weekend. Martin's phone was right there. "Martin, can I use your phone for a second? Mine's being slow." He was in the adjoining living room, feet up, watching a financial news channel. "Sure, honey, password's the same," he called back, his voice absent. The trust in that statement, the mundane normality of it, is what cuts the deepest when I look back. I picked up the device. It was warm from his hand. I entered the 4-digit code, our anniversary, and the screen unlocked. I opened the browser, my thumb hovering over the search bar. That's when the notification slid down from the top of the screen. A text message. The sender's name was Sin. The preview read, "All set for tomorrow. The operation is a go. Remember, her key is in the asterisk." The text cut off there. The world did not tilt. The room did not spin. Instead, it went very still and very quiet, as if someone had pressed a mute button on reality. The hum of the refrigerator faded. The chatter from the television became white noise. I heard the slow, thick pulse of my own blood in my ears. Operation. I stared at that word. It floated on the lit screen, black against white. A clinical, strategic word. A word for plans and maneuvers. Not a word for a surprise birthday party, which was my first desperate, ludicrous thought. My birthday was months away. "Find it," Martin's voice came from the doorway. I had not heard him get up. My body operated on an autopilot I did not know I possessed. My thumb moved. I tapped the notification. The full message opened. "All set for tomorrow. The operation is a go. Remember, her key is in the ceramic bowl by the back door. We'll use hours to get in. Dr. Evans is confirmed for 9 a.m. Just keep her calm tonight. See you then." I read it once. Then I read it again, my eyes scanning each syllable, each space between the words, searching for a different meaning that was not there. Sin, Cynthia, my best friend since sophomore year of college. Dr. Evans, a key, her asterisk key. My key, keep asterisk her calm, me. "Ronnie, everything okay?" I looked up. Martin stood in the archway between the living room and kitchen, his expression one of mild curiosity. He was smiling his easy, charming smile. The smile I had loved for 25 years. I saw the man I had built a life with, and in that moment I also saw a stranger, a conspirator. The word coward formed in my mind, clear and cold. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded normal. It came from a distance. Just a slow connection. I closed the text message app. I closed the browser. I pressed the side button, turning the screen black. I held the phone out to him. Didn't end up needing it. My tablet just finished updating. He took it, his fingers brushing mine. I did not flinch. "What are you making?" he asked, slipping the phone into his pocket. "Lemon tart," I said. I turned back to the counter where my own tablet now glowed. I placed my hands flat on the cool granite to steady them. "For the weekend, I thought it would be nice." "Sounds great," he said, and I heard the pat of his slippers as he returned to his chair and the financial news. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I examined this fact with clinical detachment. My mind was a riot, a silent screaming chamber of questions and pain, but my hands were perfectly still. I felt a strange separation from myself, as if I were observing the scene from a high corner of the kitchen. There was the woman, Veronica Chambers, in her well-appointed kitchen, planning a dessert. And there was me, the conscious core, seeing the trap that had been laid around her. The details of the kitchen came into hyper-focused clarity. The smell of the peppermint tea steeping in my mug. The precise pattern of the slate tiles under my feet. The way the afternoon light hit the glass-fronted cabinets. This was my domain. I had chosen every paint color, every appliance, every dish towel. This house was the artifact of my life's work, of our supposed shared life. and they had planned to use its own keys to enter it and execute an operation against me. Who was Dr. Evans? A psychiatrist? A neurologist? Someone they had recruited to declare me unstable, incapable, in need of care or confinement. A wellness intervention. That was the hypothesis that clicked into place with a terrible, logical certainty. It fit Martin's recent paternalistic comments about my stress levels. It fit Cynthia's constant, subtle undermining disguised as concern. "You seem tired, Ronnie. Are you sure you should take on that project? You're not as young as you used to be." The pieces, once scattered and benign, now snapped together to form a monstrous picture. Humiliation washed over me first, hot and nauseating. They thought so little of me. They thought I was a thing to be managed, a problem to be solved by a doctor and a secret plan. Then the humiliation was incinerated by a rage so pure and so cold it felt like a new kind of calm. It settled in my chest, a dense, frozen weight. I would not give them the satisfaction. I would not cry. I would not scream. I would not confront Martin in the living room. That was what they expected. That would play into their narrative of the emotional, unstable wife. I picked up my tea mug. The ceramic was almost too hot to touch. I welcomed the sharp sensation. It grounded me in my body in this moment. I took a slow sip. The hot liquid scalded my tongue, but I did not react. I walked to the kitchen doorway. Martin was back in his recliner, his profile to me. He looked comfortable, secure. He thought the operation was a go. He thought I was oblivious. He thought I was already defeated. "Martin," I said. He muted the television and turned his head. "Yeah, hun. What would you like for dinner tomorrow, since it's Friday?" I kept my tone light, conversational, a wife planning a meal. He blinked. A faint flicker of something, guilt, unease, passed over his face so quickly I might have imagined it. "Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe something simple. I might be out with Dave in the morning, remember? Golf." I nodded slowly, as if just recalling. "That's right, golf with Dave. Well, we'll figure it out." I offered a small, warm smile, the smile of a trusting wife. "I'll be in my office for a bit, some community center paperwork to sort." "Take your time," he said, and turned the sound back on. I walked down the hall, my steps measured and even. I entered my office, closed the door softly behind me, and leaned against it. Only then did I let the breath I had been holding shudder out of me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wrapped my arms around myself. I looked around the room. My books, my diplomas, the photographs of the kids from the center. My life's real work, not the decoration of a house. This was who I was, and they had dared to plot against that woman. The cold rage solidified further. It became a plan. It was not a detailed plan yet, but a direction, a resolve. They had set a time, 9 a.m. They had a strategy, so would I. I would not run. I would not hide. I would be right here in the home I had made, and I would be waiting for them. I sat down in my desk chair. It did not matter how much it hurt yet. The pain was a luxury I could not afford. I had 24 hours. I picked up a pen and a blank notebook. I opened to the first page. At the top, I wrote the date. Then, beneath it, just one line. The operation, theirs and mine. I put the pen down. The initial tremor was gone. My hands were steady again. The fear was still there, a low current underneath everything, but it was no longer in control. Something else was, something harder, something older. I sat in the quiet room, the golden hour light fatting outside my window, and I felt the first ember of my own counter-operation begin to glow. It was a small, cold light, but it was mine. I would nurse it through the night. I would let it grow. Tomorrow was Friday. Let them come. I would be ready. For now, I had a performance to maintain. I stood up, straightened my sweater, and opened the door. I walked back down the hall toward the kitchen, toward the man I no longer knew, to start making dinner. The world had cracked open, but I had already decided to step carefully over the fissures, pretending not to see them, until I chose the moment to make everyone else look down. The lemon tart was never made. I prepared a simple chicken piccata for dinner, a recipe I knew by heart, which allowed my hands to work while my mind operated elsewhere. Martin ate with good appetite, chatting about a proposed merger at his firm. I listened, I nodded, I asked appropriate questions. I was a perfect simulation of myself. The performance had begun, and I found a strange, detached solace in it. Each normal action was a move in a new, hidden game. After dinner, Martin settled back in the living room. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, wiped the counters. Each mundane task was a layer of normalcy applied over the fissure. At 8:30, I told him I had a headache and was going to turn in early to read. He gave me a kiss on the forehead, a dry, brief touch, and said he'd be up soon. I doubted that. Thursday nights were often when he caught up on reports, which meant falling asleep in his recliner. In my bedroom, I did not change into sleepwear. I put on a thick pair of socks and a cashmere robe. I waited. I listened to the sounds of the house, the hum of appliances, the distant laugh track from the television. At 9:45, I heard the distinctive creak of his recliner being put upright, then his footsteps on the stairs. He went into the bathroom down the hall. The shower ran. This was my window. I moved silently to his home office, a small, tidy room he rarely used for actual work. The desk was mostly for storage. I turned on the brass lamp, its light pooling on the green leather blotter. My objective was not to find a smoking gun, but to gather context. I started with the physical. The top drawer held pens, paper clips, old business cards. The second drawer contained files for household utilities, insurance policies, the mortgage. I flipped through them. Nothing was out of order. The mortgage was in both our names, with the bank's automated payment confirmation dated just 3 days prior. I closed the drawer and looked at the family calendar hanging on the wall. It was my system, a large grid filled with my writing, community center fundraisers, dental appointments, social engagements. In Martin's clumsy block letters for this Friday, it read, Golf W. Dave, 7 a.m. A perfect alibi. He would leave the house early, ostensibly for a morning round, and return later with the others. Dave was a real person, a colleague, which gave the entry legitimacy. It was a smart detail. I returned to my own office and closed the door. This was my true workspace. My computer was a personal one, but I had the login credentials for our joint financial accounts, a practicality from when I managed our household budget more actively. I logged into the primary checking and savings. The balances were normal. No large, recent withdrawals. The credit card statements showed the usual patterns: groceries, gas, a few online purchases. I scanned the last 3 months. There was a charge for a nice restaurant, Il Moro, 4 weeks ago. I had not been there. I noted the date. There was another 2 weeks later for the Oyster Bar. I had not been there either. Both were for 2 people. I felt a cold pinch in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. This was not about infidelity, it was about conspiracy. These were likely planning dinners with Cynthia. The next step required more fortitude. I had to hear her voice. I needed to calibrate her demeanor against the text message. I picked up my phone and called her. It rang 3 times. Ronnie, hi. Her voice was bright, a half octave too high. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said, my tone easy. I'm just sitting here trying to plan my weekend, and I realized I'm out of the good coffee. You know, the Ethiopian blend from that little place on Maple. Did you want me to pick you up a bag when I go tomorrow? There was a pause, a beat too long. Oh, thanks, but I'm actually going to be tied up tomorrow morning. Last-minute thing. Nothing serious, I hope. No, just a thing. A friend needs a hand. Her words were rushed. But thanks for thinking of me, that's so sweet. Of course, how's Peter? I asked, mentioning her husband. He's good, busy, you know. Her voice was fleeing from the topic. Listen, I'm actually in the middle of something right now, helping Peter with a spreadsheet. Can I call you this weekend? Absolutely, I said. No rush, talk soon. I ended the call and placed the phone on the desk. I replayed the conversation. The heightened brightness, the rushed explanation, the refusal of a simple, normal offer, the deflection. This was not the Cynthia who would talk for 20 minutes about coffee blends or her husband's incompetence with spreadsheets. This was a woman on alert. A memory surfaced, unbidden. It was from our 30th birthday party, a joint celebration she'd insisted we throw. She had been slightly offended that Martin had planned a smaller, more romantic dinner for me the night before. You're stealing my thunder, Ronnie, she had joked, but her eyes hadn't laughed. I had dismissed it then as playful rivalry. Now I saw a pattern. My retirement party last year, where my former staff had given such heartfelt speeches. Cynthia had leaned over and said, They really worship you, don't they? It had felt like an accusation. I opened the notebook where I had written asterisk the operation. Theirs, and mine. Beneath it, I began a new list. 1. Financial. No immediate red flags. Check again Friday a.m. Asterisk 2. Calendar, golf alibi confirmed. Asterisk 3. Cynthia, nervous, confirmed involvement. Asterisk 4. Method, use of keys, theirs plus mine from bowl. Asterisk 5. Personnel, Dr. Evans, 9 a.m. I stared at the last point, Dr. Evans. I opened a search engine on my computer. I typed the name and our city. Several results appeared: a dentist, a podiatrist, a Dr. Franklin Evans with a practice listing, psychiatric evaluations and geriatric care management. My breath caught. Geriatric care. They weren't just going to say I was stressed. They were laying the groundwork to suggest decline, incapacity. A woman in her early 50s, portrayed as slipping into premature frailty. It was more sinister and more clever than I had initially thought. It would garner more sympathy for Martin, more urgency for intervention. The cold rage intensified, focusing into a sharper point. This was not a mere humiliation. This was a structural dismantling of my personhood. They intended to use the language of medicine and concern to erode my authority in my own life. I heard Martin's footsteps in the hall. I quickly closed the notebook and shut down the computer browser. I picked up a novel from my desk as the door opened. "Still up?" he asked. He was in his pajamas. "Just finishing a chapter," I said, holding up the book. "You're off to bed." "Yeah, big day tomorrow, early golf." He said it without a flicker. "Don't wait up." "I won't have fun with Dave." I smiled. He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. I listened to his steps go into his bedroom. I placed the book down. The quiet investigation was over for the night. I had my pieces. They were ugly and they fit together perfectly. The hypothesis from the kitchen was confirmed and amplified. This was a coordinated, professionalized betrayal. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark. The glow from the streetlight outside cast faint lines through the blinds. I felt a profound sorrow then, not hot and weeping, but deep and silent. It was for the loss of the people I thought they were. That loss was now a fact. Grieving it would have to come later. The strategic part of my mind, the part that had run community centers and negotiated budgets and soothed fractious boards, was now fully in command. It acknowledged the sorrow and filed it away. There was work to do. Commitment solidified within me, hard and clear as ice. I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I was the opposing force. I had the time. I had the information. I had the home field advantage. And I had something they had fatally underestimated: my composure. Their operation depended on my predictable emotional reaction. I would not give it to them. My counter-operation would require precision. It would require witnesses. It would require turning their own machinery against them. I did not have the full shape of it yet, but the foundations were set. I stood up from the desk. Tomorrow was Friday. Their D-Day. I needed to be rested. I walked to my bedroom, now a separate chamber from Martin, and got into bed. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, and began methodically to plan my morning. I did not sleep. The night was a long, dark corridor of thoughts. I lay still, my mind assembling and disassembling the pieces I had gathered. By the time the first gray light touched the windows, I had moved from shock into analysis. The emotional storm was contained behind a dam of necessity. I got up at 5, moving through the silent house like a ghost. I made tea, not coffee. The ritual was familiar, but the purpose was new. I carried the steaming mug into the living room and sat in my armchair, the one by the large window that looked out onto the garden. This was where I read, where I thought. Now it was my command post. I had my notebook. I opened it to the list from the night before. I read each point again. Then I turned to a fresh page. At the top I wrote, "What is the operation?" I began with possibilities, writing them down in clear, numbered lines. 1. A surprise party. This was the kindest interpretation. It was immediately discarded. Surprise parties do not require a doctor. They do not involve secretly obtaining my key. They are not discussed with the tense, covert language of a military campaign. 2. A practical joke or humiliating prank. Martin had never been one for elaborate jokes. Cynthia's humor tended more towards sarcasm than slapstick. The involvement of a medical professional made no sense. This was too juvenile for their apparent seriousness. 3. A financial maneuver. They could be planning to have me declared incompetent to gain control of assets, but my quiet checking of the accounts showed no frantic activity. Such a legal process would be slow, requiring evaluations and court dates. This was scheduled for tomorrow morning. It was too swift. 4. An intervention for addiction or mental health. This was the hypothesis that held weight. It fit the doctor. It fit their recent narrative of my supposed fatigue and stress. It was a modern, socially acceptable coup. Declare someone unstable, rally concerned loved ones, and have them escorted to a facility for help. Once inside, your voice becomes the voice of a patient, not a person. I circled number 4. This felt correct. But why? What was their end goal? Martin's motivation was likely financial and existential. A midlife crisis dressed up as concern. If I were unwell, he could control our finances, sell the house, perhaps even divorce me with more favorable terms, citing my incapacity. He could paint himself as the burdened, caring husband. He would get sympathy and money. Cynthia's motivation was more personal. I thought of the remembered slights, the competitive edge that had sharpened over the years. If I were diminished, she would no longer be in my shadow. She could be the strong one, the sane one, the one who helped Martin through this difficult time. She would gain stature from my fall. Her involvement also provided a critical female witness, making the intervention seem less like a husband's power grab and more like a collective, caring act. The method became clear. They would arrive at 9 a.m. Martin would have left for his golf alibi, only to return with them, presumably just in time to find the doctor already assessing his distressed wife. They would use their own key, plus mine from the bowl, to enter without warning, aiming to catch me off guard, perhaps still in bed, disheveled, vulnerable. Dr. Evans would ask questions designed to elicit confusion or anxiety. With the two of them there to corroborate stories of my recent decline, the doctor's evaluation would be skewed. They might even have a facility in mind, papers ready to be signed in the heat of the moment. It was a clean, cruel plan. It leveraged trust, used medicine as a weapon, and relied on social norms about caring for those who are unwell. Its brilliance was in its apparent benevolence. Who could argue against someone getting help? I could, because I was not unwell. I was clear-eyed and furious. I sipped my tea, now lukewarm. The morning light had strengthened, outlining the branches of the oak tree in the yard. A plan of my own began to coalesce, not as a full blueprint, but as a set of principles. Their plan required a specific reaction from me: fear, confusion, hysterical denial. That would confirm their narrative. Therefore, my reaction must be the opposite. I must exhibit supreme calm, lucidity, and control. They needed a scene of crisis. I would present a scene of orderly, deliberate confrontation. I needed to negate the doctor's authority. I could not do that by simply arguing with him. I needed a countervailing authority, a witness they could not dismiss. The idea surfaced slowly, then fixed itself with certainty. The police. Not a 911 call for an emergency, but a preemptive, rational request. If I called the non-emergency line, explained I was anticipating a stressful domestic situation and feared being misrepresented, could an officer be present? It was a long shot. But it was a possibility. More importantly, I needed to control the physical space. They planned to storm my bedroom. I would not be in my bedroom. I would be in a space of my choosing, dressed and prepared, occupying the role of the homeowner, not the patient. The dining room. It was formal, neutral ground. The long table could be a barrier, a stage. And I needed evidence. The text message was my primary piece, but it was on Martin's phone. I had only my memory of it. I would have to quote it verbatim. I wrote it down again in my notebook, committing it to memory. All set for tomorrow. The operation is a go. Remember, her key is in the ceramic bowl by the back door. We'll use hours to get in. Dr. Evans is confirmed for 9 a.m. Just keep her calm tonight. See you then. I underlined * operation and Dr. Evans *. The heart of my counterplan would be exposure. I would not defend myself against their accusations. I would accuse them calmly, with the facts I had. I would reveal their conspiracy before they could enact it. I would turn their ambush into a tribunal, with me as the accuser and hopefully an impartial officer as the witness. I closed the notebook. The hypothesis was now a working theory. The vague resolve from the night before had crystallized into a sequence of actions. First, the call, then the preparation of the stage, finally the performance itself. I heard movement upstairs. Martin was awake. The day, my Friday, had begun. I stood up, my body stiff from hours of stillness. I felt a profound fatigue, but beneath it was a wire-taut sense of readiness. The emotional pain was still there, a deep ache, but it was compartmentalized. It was fuel, not an obstacle. I walked to the kitchen to start breakfast, to begin my performance of normalcy for the final act. As I took eggs and butter from the refrigerator, I realized something. For the first time since seeing that text, I was not afraid of what they would do. I was interested in how they would do it. I was studying them, as a director studies actors before a play. The shift was subtle but complete. I was no longer the victim in their story. I was the author of my own. The hypothesis was proven in my mind. The operation was a wellness intervention designed to discredit and control me. My counter-operation would be a demonstration of wellness so complete it would discredit and disarm them. It was a simple, elegant reversal. All I had to do was execute it perfectly. I cracked an egg against the rim of a bowl. The shell gave way cleanly. The eggs were scrambled, the toast buttered. I placed the plate in front of Martin as he sat at the kitchen island. He was dressed in his golf clothes, a crisp polo shirt and khaki pants. He looked the part perfectly. "Big game today?" I asked, pouring orange juice into a glass. "Just a casual round with Dave," he said, not meeting my eyes. He picked up his fork. "You sure you're okay here alone all morning?" The concern in his voice was a practiced thing, a note he was rehearsing for later. I heard the slight strain beneath it. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, leaning against the counter with my own coffee. "Quiet morning to putter in the garden, maybe start that new book. You know I love a few hours to myself." He nodded, chewing. "Right, of course. Well, I should be back by early afternoon, probably." "Take your time," I said, my smile easy. "Enjoy the fresh air." He ate quickly, a man eager to be gone. I watched his hands. They were steady, but he tapped his thumb against the granite countertop once, twice. A tiny tell. He was nervous. Good. Let him be nervous. I was calm. 20 minutes later, he gave me a quick peck on the cheek, hefted his golf bag, and left. I listened to the garage door rumble open, then the sound of his car backing out. The silence that followed was different from the quiet of the night before. It was active, full of potential. It was my silence now. I went directly to my office. I did not allow myself a moment to dwell on the finality of his departure. There was work to do. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook to a clean page, and picked up a pen. I needed to draft my statement. It could not be emotional. It could not be an accusation. It needed to be a recitation of facts, clear and logical, that I could deliver calmly when the time came. I wrote a header, points to make Friday. Beneath it, I began a bulleted list. At approximately 4:15 p.m. yesterday, I saw a text message on Martin's phone from Cynthia. The text read, "All set for tomorrow. The operation is a go. Remember, her key is in the ceramic bowl by the back door. We'll use ours to get in. Dr. Evans is confirmed for 9 a.m. Just keep her calm tonight. See you then." I have had no prior discussions with Martin or Cynthia about any medical or psychological concerns, nor any agreement to see a Dr. Evans. Martin left this morning stating he was going to play golf with Dave, an alibi that appears on our family calendar. Based on the text, I believe they are planning an unsolicited intervention, intending to have me declared mentally unfit for purposes I can only speculate are financial or personal. I am of sound mind. I am preemptively stating my objection to any such evaluation conducted under these coercive circumstances. I read it over. It was dry, factual, and devastating. It laid out their conspiracy without hysterics. It was the statement of a person in full possession of her faculties. The next step was the call. I found the non-emergency number for the local police department online. My finger hovered over the screen. This was the moment of no return. Making this call was an admission that the situation was real and that I expected trouble. It was also my first active move in the counter-operation. I pressed the button. The line rang twice. Springville Police Department, non-emergency line, Officer Brooks speaking. The voice was female, crisp, without warmth but not unkind. "Good morning," I said, keeping my tone even and polite. "My name is Veronica Chambers. I live at 2147 Willow Lane. I am calling because I am anticipating a potentially volatile domestic situation at my home this morning at approximately 9 o'clock, and I would like to request a wellness check." There was a brief pause. "A wellness check for yourself, ma'am?" "Yes. I have reason to believe my husband and another individual are planning to arrive with a doctor to conduct an unsolicited psychological intervention. I am not in distress, and I do not consent to this. However, given the nature of the situation, I would like an officer present as an impartial witness to ensure the interaction remains civil and that my position is clearly documented." I heard the soft clack of a keyboard. "Can you provide more details, Mrs. Chambers?" I summarized the text message, the time, the names. I kept my sentences short and clear. "I am not in any immediate danger," I repeated. "I am simply seeking a neutral third party to observe. I will be in the dining room of the residence." Another pause. I could almost hear her assessment. This was not a typical frantic 911 call. It was a measured, preemptive request from a calm-sounding woman. "We don't typically schedule wellness checks in advance, ma'am. Officers respond based on call priority." "I understand that," I said. "But if an officer is available near that time, I would greatly appreciate it. The scheduled arrival is 9 a.m. My primary concern is having an official record of my state of mind prior to any interaction with this doctor." There was a longer silence. "I've made a note of your request and the details, Mrs. Chambers. I can't guarantee an officer will be available at that precise time, but the information will be in our system if a call related to your address comes in." It was not a promise, but it was something. It was a footprint. "Thank you, Officer Brooks. I appreciate your time." "You're welcome. Take care." The call ended. I placed the phone down. My hand was steady. The interaction had been clinical, exactly as I had hoped. I had planted a seed. Whether it would bear fruit at 9 o'clock was uncertain, but I had done what I could from within the lines of procedure. I looked at the clock. It was 7:45 a.m. I had an hour and 15 minutes to set the stage. I stood up. The planning phase was over. The preparation had begun. I walked to the dining room and surveyed the space. The long, polished table. The 6 high-backed chairs. The sideboard with its simple vase. This was the right place. It was a room for meetings, for discussions, not for ambushes. My first action was to go to the ceramic bowl by the back door. My spare key was there, nestled beside a few loose coins. I picked it up. The cold metal felt insignificant, a tiny tool of a vast betrayal. I put it in the pocket of my robe. They would not use my key. Then I returned to the dining room. I would not set the table for a party. I would set it for one, a statement of self-sufficiency. I took a placemat, a linen napkin, a plate, a cup and saucer, and cutlery from the cabinet. I arranged them at the head of the table where I always sat. I did it with deliberate care, aligning each piece precisely. This was my ritual. This was my claim. The clock ticked toward 8. I had a little time. I would shower, dress in an outfit that conveyed authority and calm, not battle armor, but the uniform of a woman in command of her home. I would make myself a proper breakfast and eat it at that table, slowly, reading the newspaper. I would be the picture of mundane, unshakable normalcy. The counterplan was no longer a hypothesis. It was a sequence of actions now in motion. The call had been placed. The stage was being set. All that remained was for the actors to arrive and play their parts. I knew my lines. I was ready for my cue. The shower was a reset. The hot water sluiced away the night's vigil, but not the purpose. I dressed with deliberate care. I chose a pair of well-cut charcoal trousers, a soft ivory cashmere sweater, and simple pearl studs. It was an outfit that spoke of quiet confidence, of a woman at ease in her own home. It was my armor, not of metal, but of normalcy. Downstairs, I moved to the kitchen. I would eat a real breakfast. This was part of the performance, a demonstration of routine. I scrambled 2 eggs, toasted a slice of sourdough, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I carried the plate and cup to the dining room and set them on the place setting I had arranged. I opened the morning newspaper to the business section, a part I rarely read. The words were a blur, but the posture was everything. A woman enjoying a solitary, peaceful breakfast. I ate slowly. Each bite was a conscious act. I listened to the house, to the distant chime of the grandfather clock in the hall marking the half hour. It was 8:30. Tension began to coil in my stomach, a cold, tight spring. I acknowledged it and set it aside. I took a sip of coffee. My hand did not shake. At 8:45, I cleared my place. I washed the plate, the cup, the pan. I wiped the counters. I restored the kitchen to a state of perfect order. This was my territory, and I would leave no sign of distress within it. I walked to the living room and sat on the sofa. I picked up a book from the side table, a novel I had been meaning to finish. I opened it to a random page. I did not read. I waited. The clock ticked. At 9:05, I heard a car door shut outside. Then another. My heart hammered once, a hard, painful thump against my ribs. I closed the book and placed it neatly on the cushion beside me. I did not stand up. I listened. The key turned in the front door lock. Their key. The mechanism clicked, a sound so ordinary it was obscene. The door swung open. I heard hushed voices in the foyer. Martin's, low and tense. Cynthia's, a nervous whisper. A third, unfamiliar male voice murmuring something professional-sounding. They were trying to be quiet, expecting to find a house asleep, a woman in disarray. I remained seated. I picked up the newspaper again, unfolding it with a crisp rustle. The sound carried into the foyer. The whispers stopped. Footsteps approached the living room archway. I kept my eyes on the paper, on an article about municipal bonds I did not see. Ronnie. I looked up slowly, as if mildly surprised by the interruption. Martin stood in the doorway, still in his golf clothes. His face was pale, his expression a poorly constructed mask of concern. Behind him, I saw Cynthia, her eyes wide, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. And beside her, a man in his late 50s with a trimmed beard and a leather satchel. Dr. Evans. I let the silence hang for a count of 3. I looked from one face to the next, my gaze steady, registering each of them. Then I allowed a small, cool smile to touch my lips. "Good morning," I said, my voice even and clear in the quiet room. "You're just in time." Martin blinked. Cynthia's mouth opened slightly, then closed. The doctor shifted his weight, glancing at Martin with a hint of confusion. They were frozen, a tableau of shock. This was not in their script. They had expected to lead, to guide, to manage a scene of crisis. They found instead a woman in command of her living room, perfectly composed. "Ronnie, we were worried," Martin stammered, taking a step into the room. "This is Dr. Evans. He's here to help." "Is he?" I said, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. I stood up smoothly. I am a tall woman, and I used every inch of my height. "Why would I need a doctor's help, Martin? And why would you bring him into our home without my knowledge or consent?" "You haven't been yourself," Cynthia blurted out, her voice tight. "We're concerned, Ronnie, really." I turned my gaze to her. The weight of our years of friendship was in that look, all of it now turned to ash. "Cynthia, you have a key to my house. You are here with my husband and a stranger, uninvited on a Friday morning. Explain to me how this constitutes concern." "Now let's all just calm down," Dr. Evans said, adopting a soothing, clinical tone. He took a step forward. "Mrs. Chambers, I'm here at the request of your husband and your friend. They've expressed some valid worries about your recent well-being. I'm just here to talk." "I do not wish to talk to you," I said, my tone polite but absolute. "Your presence here is based on a fabrication. You are participating in an operation." The word landed in the room like a stone. Martin flinched. "What are you talking about?" he said, but his voice lacked force. I looked past him toward the front hallway. "I believe you will find the key from the ceramic bowl is missing. I have it." I paused, letting that detail, that proof of my knowledge, settle. I saw the text message on your phone yesterday, Martin, the one from Sin, the one that detailed the operation. Cynthia made a small, choked sound. The color drained from Martin's face completely. The doctor looked sharply at him, his professional detachment slipping into uncertainty. I have no need for an intervention, I continued, my voice calm and measured, each word a precise drop of ice. But since you have gone to the trouble of assembling one, let us have it. Let us discuss this operation of yours, but we will do it properly. I gestured toward the dining room. Shall we sit? I did not wait for their answer. I turned and walked the short distance to the dining room. I took my seat at the head of the table. I placed my hands flat on the polished wood. I waited. After a moment of stunned hesitation, they filed in. Martin and Cynthia looked like children called to the principal's office. Dr. Evans hovered near the doorway, his satchel suddenly looking absurd. Sit, I said. Martin and Cynthia took seats opposite me, as far down the table as they could. The doctor remained standing. Now, I said, who would like to begin? Who would like to explain to me what the operation is, and why you believed it necessary to deploy it against me in my own home? The silence that followed my question was thick and fragile. Martin stared at his hands on the table. Cynthia's gaze darted from me to the doctor and back, her earlier confidence gone. Dr. Evans cleared his throat. Mrs. Chambers, I think there's been a misunderstanding, he began, his voice resuming that practiced, calming cadence. Your loved ones are here because they care. The term operation is perhaps an unfortunate choice of words, but the intention is purely supportive. The text message did not say support, I replied, my eyes still on Martin. It said operation. It said to use my key. It named you doctor and a specific time. Those are not the words of a misunderstanding. They are the words of a plan. Martin, look at me. He dragged his eyes up to meet mine. In them, I saw fear, and beneath it, a flash of the old resentment I had sometimes glimpsed and chosen to ignore. We were worried about you, Ronnie, he said, but the line was weak, rote. Define worried, I said. Provide a single specific example of behavior from the past month that justified secretly arranging a psychiatric evaluation. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Cynthia jumped in. You've been distant. You're always in your office. You don't sleep. You seem agitated. I have been planning a community fundraiser, I said, my voice flat. My sleep patterns are unchanged. If I seemed agitated yesterday, it was because I had just read a text on my husband's phone that revealed a conspiracy against me. I turned back to Dr. Evans. Doctor, are you aware that my husband left this morning under the pretense of a golf game? It is written on our family calendar. He has no golf clubs with him. He changed his clothes in the car. This was a tactical maneuver to preserve an alibi. Dr. Evans shifted his weight. He looked at Martin. Is that true? It's not like that, Martin mumbled. Then what is it like? I pressed. Shall I quote the entire message for the doctor? All set for tomorrow. The operation is a go. Remember, her key is in the ceramic bowl by the back door. We'll use hours to get in. Dr. Evans is confirmed for 9 a.m. Just keep her calm tonight. See you then. I recited it slowly, without emphasis, letting each word hang in the air. Cynthia sent that. Sin, my best friend since college. Cynthia's face crumpled. You've been under so much stress, Ronnie. We thought you needed help you wouldn't ask for. You thought you would have me declared incompetent, I stated. It was not a question. That is the only logical endpoint of this operation. A wellness intervention that shifts into a competency evaluation. With 2 concerned witnesses and a doctor's preliminary assessment, you could have begun a process. A process that would give Martin control of our assets. That would remove me from my home. That would make me a problem to be managed, not a person to be heard. That's a paranoid interpretation, Martin said, finding a sliver of defiance. Is it? I asked. Then explain the endgame. What precisely was supposed to happen after Dr. Evans talked to me at 9 o'clock this morning? Was I to be escorted somewhere? Were there papers to sign? No one answered. Dr. Evans's professional demeanor was now fully cracked. He was watching a domestic and ethical disaster unfold in real time. Mr. Chambers, he said, his voice stern. You led me to believe your wife was experiencing cognitive episodes and was a danger to herself. You said she was aware of and resistant to an evaluation. This appears to be a different scenario." At that moment, the doorbell rang. The sound was clean, sharp, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the dining room. All three of them startled. I did not. "Excuse me," I said, rising from my chair. "That will be the police." Cynthia gasped. Martin's head snapped up. "The what?" "I requested a wellness check," I said, walking toward the foyer. "For myself. I anticipated a volatile situation and wanted an impartial witness. It seems one was available after all." I left them sitting there, frozen in a new and deeper kind of shock. I opened the front door. A woman in a patrol officer's uniform stood on the porch. She was in her 40s, with a sharp, observant face and her hair in a neat bun. Her nameplate read Brooks. It was the voice from the phone. "Mrs. Chambers?" she asked. "Yes, Officer Brooks. Please come in. Thank you for coming." She gave a single nod and stepped inside. Her eyes took in the foyer, then moved to the dining room archway, where Martin, Cynthia, and the doctor were now visibly straining to see. "You mentioned a possible domestic situation." "It is in progress," I said, my voice low and calm. "My husband, my former friend, and a doctor they hired are in the dining room. They entered using their own key to stage an unsolicited psychological intervention based on a fabricated narrative. I have just confronted them with the evidence. I would appreciate your presence as a witness." Officer Brooks's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were alert, assessing. "I'll need to speak to everyone." "Of course, this way." I led her into the dining room. The scene was pathetic. Martin looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Cynthia was wiping her eyes, though no tears had fallen. Dr. Evans stood awkwardly, his satchel held in front of him like a shield. "This is Officer Brooks," I announced. "Officer, this is my husband, Martin Chambers. This is Cynthia Ellis, my friend. And this is Dr. Franklin Evans, whom they contracted for today's event." "Officer," Martin began, standing up too quickly. "This is all a huge mistake, a family matter." "I'm here at Mrs. Chambers's request," Officer Brooks said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She did not sit. She remained standing near the doorway, a notebook in her hand. "She has expressed concerns about a plot against her. She mentioned a text message. I need to understand what's happening here." She looked at me. "Mrs. Chambers, you can proceed." I felt a surge of cold gratitude for her formality. She was not taking sides, but she was following procedure, and procedure demanded that I be heard. "Thank you," I said. I turned to face the table, addressing Officer Brooks but speaking for all to hear. "Yesterday afternoon, I saw a text message on my husband's phone from Cynthia. I will recite it." I did so again, with the same dispassionate clarity. "I have had no discussions about my mental health with either of them. I have no history of psychiatric care. My husband left this morning under a false alibi. They entered my home without my permission at the appointed time with this doctor. Their stated goal was an intervention. My belief is their goal was to lay groundwork to have me declared incompetent for financial and personal gain." "That's a lie," Cynthia cried, but her voice was thin, desperate. "Is it?" I asked, finally letting a sliver of ice into my tone. "Then tell the officer what the operation was. Right now, define it." Cynthia looked at Martin, pleading. He said nothing. He was staring at the grain of the wood on the table, defeated. Dr. Evans spoke. "Officer, I was contacted by Mr. Chambers for a home-based geriatric care consultation. He described symptoms consistent with early cognitive decline. He stated his wife was resistant to help. I was not informed of any clandestine planning." He looked at Martin with clear disapproval. "My participation was obtained under false pretenses. I will be leaving now." He nodded stiffly to Officer Brooks, cast one last, mortified glance at the room, and walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind him was final. The operation had lost its medical authority. Now it was just the two of them, me and a police officer. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The unraveling was complete. All that remained was to state the consequences. The doctor's departure left a vacuum in the room, filled only by the sound of his car starting outside. Officer Brooks watched him go, then turned her attention back to us. Her presence was a solid, unflinching fact. She clicked her pen. "All right," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "I need to get statements from each of you, separately. Mrs. Chambers, you've made your statement clear. Mr. Chambers, Ms. Ellis, I'll need to hear your version of events, starting with why you arranged for a doctor to enter this home without the homeowner's knowledge or consent." Martin found his voice, though it was frayed. "Officer, as I said, this is a private family matter, a misunderstanding. My wife has been under stress. She's not thinking clearly." "I am thinking with perfect clarity," I interrupted, my tone even. "Officer Brooks, you have heard my account. You have seen their reaction. The evidence is the text message, which I can direct you to on my husband's phone, and their presence here at the exact time specified. I am alleging a conspiracy to commit fraud, specifically to fabricate grounds for guardianship or competency proceedings." Officer Brooks's eyebrows lifted slightly. She looked at Martin. "Is there such a text message on your phone, Mr. Chambers?" He hesitated, his hand moving instinctively toward his pocket. It's not what it sounds like." "May I see your phone, sir?" The formality of the request left no room for refusal. With a look of profound defeat, Martin pulled his phone from his pocket, unlocked it, and handed it to her. He did not need to find the message. She navigated to his texts, found the thread with Cynthia, and read it. Her face revealed nothing, but her eyes scanned the words once, then again. She looked up at Cynthia. "Ms. Ellis, did you send this text?" Cynthia had begun to cry in earnest now, silent tears streaking her makeup. "We were trying to help," she whispered. "By planning an operation to bring a doctor into her home by using a key she didn't know you'd take." Officer Brooks's question was neutral, but its content was damning. She made a note in her pad. "Mr. Chambers, did you and Ms. Ellis discuss a plan to have your wife declared mentally incompetent?" "No, not incompetent, just we thought she needed an evaluation," Martin said, but the foundation of his lie was crumbling. "Based on what specifically?" Officer Brooks pressed. He faltered. "She's been forgetful, withdrawn." "Can you provide an instance? A date? Did you suggest she see her primary care physician? Did you discuss your concerns with her directly?" Each question was a brick, building a wall around his false narrative. He had no answers because there were no real facts, only vague insinuations. It was more a feeling," he finished, weakly. Officer Brooks turned to Cynthia. "Ms. Ellis." Cynthia shook her head, unable to speak. Her silence was an admission. The officer closed her notebook. "Here is the situation as I see it," she said, addressing all of us but her stance oriented toward Martin and Cynthia. "No crime of violence or unlawful imprisonment has been attempted, so this is not a matter for arrest at this time. However, Mrs. Chambers has documented a credible threat to her personal liberty and property through deceptive means. The text message is evidence of planning to gain unauthorized entry and to manipulate a medical professional. Dr. Evans's withdrawal supports her account." She looked at me. "Mrs. Chambers, my report will reflect your statement, the content of the text, and the doctor's confirmation that he was misled. This document can be used in any future civil proceedings, such as a restraining order or divorce filings, to establish a pattern of bad faith and conspiracy." Then she turned to Martin and Cynthia. Her voice hardened. "As for you two, you are on notice. Any further attempt to contact Mrs. Chambers against her will, to enter this property, or to involve third parties in schemes against her will be viewed in light of this incident. It will not go well for you. Do you understand?" Martin nodded, a stiff, jerky motion. Cynthia sobbed quietly. "Do you understand?" Officer Brooks repeated, firmer. "Yes," Martin muttered. "Yes," Cynthia choked out. "Good." Officer Brooks handed Martin back his phone. "Mr. Chambers, I strongly advise you to gather some personal effects and leave this residence immediately. Mrs. Chambers is well within her rights to revoke your access to her home. I will remain present while you do so, to ensure the process is peaceful." The finality of that sentence, asterisk her home asterisk, landed with physical force. Martin's head snapped up. "This is my house too." The legal title may be joint, Officer Brooks said, her tone devoid of sympathy. But given the circumstances, your continued presence constitutes a potential for emotional distress and conflict. You will leave. Now, you can discuss the division of assets with lawyers later. My concern is the immediate preservation of peace. I watched him. The last vestiges of his entitlement melted away, leaving only a shell of a man, exposed and ashamed. He had played a hand and lost everything. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. "Fine," he said, the word hollow. "I'll accompany you," Officer Brooks said. She looked at Cynthia. "You will wait here with Mrs. Chambers." Cynthia's eyes widened in panic at the prospect of being alone with me, but she said nothing. Officer Brooks followed Martin out of the dining room and up the stairs. I could hear the muffled sounds of drawers opening and closing, a zipper. It was a swift, clinical dismantling of a life. I remained standing at the head of the table. Cynthia did not look at me. She stared at her own hands, twisted together in her lap. The silence between us was absolute, a chasm filled with 25 years of friendship now dead. After several minutes, I spoke. My voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "You were my sister." She flinched, but did not raise her head. "There is nothing left to say," I continued. "When Officer Brooks comes down, you will leave. You will not contact me again. You will not call, you will not text, you will not send a letter. If you see me in public, you will turn and walk the other way. Our friendship is over. Do you understand?" She nodded, a tear dropping onto the table. It left a dark spot on the polished wood. "Verbal confirmation, Cynthia." "I understand," she whispered. "Good." We waited. The unraveling was complete. Their plot had been exposed, their authority stripped, their alliance broken. The operation had been terminated, not by them, but by its intended target. I felt no triumph, only a vast, cold emptiness. And beneath that, the first, faint stirrings of something else, relief. The sounds from upstairs ceased. Footsteps descended, measured and heavy. Martin appeared in the dining room doorway, a leather duffel bag in one hand, a suit bag draped over his arm. He looked smaller. Officer Brooks stood behind him, a silent escort. He did not look at me. He looked at the floor, at the wall, anywhere but at the woman he had married. I'll be at the Hampton Inn," he said to the room in general. I did not acknowledge him. I addressed Officer Brooks. "I would like his key, please, and hers." Brooks nodded. "Mr. Chambers, your house key." With a stiff movement, he fished his keychain from his pocket, struggled to remove the silver house key, and placed it on the sideboard. The clink of metal on wood was a period at the end of a sentence. "Cynthia," Officer Brooks said. Cynthia jumped. She fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking. She found her key, the one I'd given her years ago for emergencies, for pet sitting, for friendship, and set it beside Martin's. The two keys lay there, inert, stripped of their symbolic power. "You will both now leave," I said. It was not a request. Martin turned and walked out without a backward glance. Cynthia stood, her legs unsteady. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but my expression halted the words. She followed Martin, a phantom of the vibrant woman I had known. Officer Brooks remained with me. We listened to the front door open and close. Through the dining room window, I saw Martin's car reverse out of the driveway. Cynthia's sedan followed. They did not leave together. The alliance, it seemed, was as broken as everything else. The silence that filled the house then was profound. It was not the active, waiting silence of the morning. It was a hollow, echoing silence. The air itself felt different. Officer Brooks let out a slow breath. "Mrs. Chambers," she said, her official tone softening just a degree. "Are you all right? Do you need anything? A friend to call? A crisis counselor?" "I am all right," I said, and in that moment it was both true and not true. I was intact. I was standing. I had prevailed, but I was not all right. "I have what I need. Thank you for your professionalism, Officer Brooks. It made all the difference." She gave a short nod. "You handled a terrible situation with remarkable composure. The report will be filed by end of day. You can request a copy online or come to the station. I've noted my badge number on this card." She handed me a small business card. If they harass you in any way, call 911 immediately and reference today's incident. Do not hesitate. I won't. She looked around the quiet, sunlit dining room, then back at me. You should consider changing the locks today. Even with the keys returned, it's a good practice. I will, I said. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Chambers. She left, closing the front door gently behind her. I listened for the sound of her patrol car driving away. When it faded, the silence returned, absolute. I stood in the dining room for a long time. I looked at the 2 keys on the sideboard. I looked at the chairs where Martin and Cynthia had sat. I looked at my own seat at the head of the table. The stage was empty. The performance was over. I moved then, not with purpose, but with a kind of autonomic need. I went to the sideboard, picked up the 2 keys, and carried them to the kitchen. I opened the drawer beneath the phone, the drawer that held batteries, tape, dead pens. I dropped the keys inside and closed the drawer. It was not a symbolic gesture, it was practical disposal. They were trash now. I walked through the downstairs rooms, the living room where I had waited, the kitchen where I had made breakfast, the foyer where they had entered. Every space felt simultaneously familiar and alien. It was my home, but it had been violated. It was also now entirely mine. Fatigue crashed over me, a wave so heavy my knees felt weak. It was the delayed collapse of 36 hours of sustained tension. I walked to the living room sofa and sat down. The novel I had pretended to read was still there. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, then set it aside. I thought I might cry. The pressure was there behind my eyes, in my throat. But the tears did not come. The emotion was too vast, too complex. A tangle of grief, rage, betrayal, and a shocking, undeniable thread of liberation. I could not cry because I could not isolate one feeling from the others. Instead, I sat in the quiet. I listened to the house settle, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, my own breathing. I replayed the morning in my mind, not as a participant, but as a reviewer. The moment they walked in, the recitation of the text, the arrival of Officer Brooks, the doctor's exit, the dismantling of Martin, the banishment of Cynthia, each move had been correct. Each word had hit its mark. I had won, but victory, in this case, felt like surviving a plane crash. You are alive, but everything is wreckage around you. After a while, I stood up. There were practical matters. I found my phone and called a locksmith. I scheduled an appointment for 2 o'clock. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Elaine who had handled the community center's legal affairs. I left a voicemail summarizing the situation in 3 sentences and asked her to call me Monday about initiating divorce proceedings and a formal cease and desist letter to Cynthia. Actions, concrete forward-moving actions, they were my anchor. It was only early afternoon. The day stretched ahead, empty and long. I was not hungry. I was not tired in a way that sleep could fix. I was simply present in the aftermath. I walked to the back door and looked out at my garden. The late spring flowers were blooming, peonies, irises, the first roses. It was a world of color and life, oblivious to the drama inside the house. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. The air was warm, carrying the scent of cut grass and damp soil. I stood on the patio and took a deep, deliberate breath. It was not a breath of relief, not yet. It was a breath of acknowledgement. This was the new arrangement. Empty house, silent phone, solo future. The plot had been foiled, the plotters exiled. The operation was over. My life, whatever it would become, was now my own to design. The thought was terrifying. It was also, for the first time in many years, completely honest. The garden's peace was a veneer, but I clung to it. I stayed outside until the sun grew too warm, until the practical part of my mind reasserted itself. There was no time for a breakdown. There were systems to put in place. I went back inside. The locksmith arrived promptly at 2, a quiet, efficient man who asked no questions. He replaced the front and back door locks with new, heavy-duty deadbolts. He gave me 4 shiny new keys. The transaction was simple, a financial exchange for security. When he left, I tested each lock. The solid asterisk thunk of the bolt sliding home was a satisfying sound. The house was now a fortress with a new key, mine alone. My attorney, Elaine, called back at 3. Her voice was all business, which I appreciated. "Ronnie, I got your message. That's quite a situation. Are you safe?" "I am safe. They're gone. The police have a report." "Good. Send me the report number. For the divorce, we'll file on grounds of constructive abandonment and fraud. His actions provide ample cause. We'll also file a temporary restraining order based on the police report to prevent any contact or attempts to re-enter the home. He won't be able to come near the property." "Do it," I said. "Financially, we'll freeze the joint accounts immediately and petition for temporary spousal support from him. Given the circumstances, the judge will look favorably on you. I'll need you to come in Monday to sign papers." "I'll be there." "And the friend, Cynthia." "A cease and desist. No contact of any kind." "Consider it done." She paused. "Ronnie, this is brutal, but you're doing the right things. Call me if he so much as texts you." The call ended. Each instruction was a step on a new path, a legal and procedural dismantling of the life we'd built. It was not emotional. It was administrative. I found comfort in that. With the mechanisms in motion, I turned to the house itself. I started in the master bedroom. It still smelled of Martin's cologne. I opened the windows wide. I stripped the bed of the linens he had slept in last, bundling them into the laundry hamper. I cleared his side of the bathroom counter. Razor, deodorant, a half-empty bottle of expensive hair gel. I placed these items in a cardboard box I brought up from the garage. I did not throw them away. They were evidence of occupancy, to be dealt with later by lawyers or donation. I did the same in his home office, though there was little personal there. A few golf trophies, a framed photo of us from a decade ago, smiling on a beach. I took the photo out of the frame and dropped it into the box. The glass went into recycling. The frame, empty, I kept. It was a nice frame. The physical act of removing his presence was methodical, almost meditative. It was not driven by rage, but by a need for hygiene. I was sanitizing my space. By early evening, the box was full and sealed with tape. I carried it to the garage and set it beside his golf clubs, which he had not taken. They were his problem now. I returned to the kitchen. I was hungry, a simple biological signal I had ignored all day. I made a meal for myself. A salad and omelet. I ate at the kitchen island, not the formal dining room. The silence was pervasive, but it was no longer threatening. It was a blank canvas. After eating, I poured a small glass of wine. I took it and my phone into the living room. I scrolled through my contacts. I had let so many genuine connections lapse in the orbit of Martin's world and Cynthia's constant presence. I found a few names. Sarah from the community center board, a no-nonsense woman my age. Elena, a former colleague who had moved to a nearby town. I did not call them. It was too soon for explanations, but I noted their names. They were possibilities. As dusk fell, the house grew dark. I moved from room to room, turning on lights. I turned on more lights than I needed, banishing the shadows from every corner. I was not afraid. I was asserting dominion. I took my glass of wine and walked upstairs. I did not go to the master bedroom. I went to the guest room, which had a smaller, sunnier aspect. I would sleep there tonight. The master could air out, could wait until I decided what to do with it. Perhaps I would turn it into a proper sitting room, a library. I stood at the guest room window, looking out at the quiet street. A neighbor walked their dog. A car drove by, normal life continuing. I was part of it again, but separate, isolated but free. The grief arrived then, not as a storm, but as a slow, deep ache. It was for the loss of the future I had imagined. The comfortable, companionable retirement. The travels, the holidays with friends, the quiet companionship of a long marriage. That future was a fiction, built on the false loyalty of a man who saw me as an obstacle and a friend who saw me as a rival. The reality had been this plot. The grief was for the death of that illusion. I let the ache be. I did not fight it. I sipped the wine. I acknowledged the sorrow for what it was, the necessary cost of truth. Then I set the glass down. I picked up my phone. I opened a notes app. At the top, I typed, "Things to do for me *." I started a list. 1. Repaint living room, lighter color. 2. Contact Sarah and Elena. 3. Look into mentorship program structure. 4. New bedding for guest room. The list was mundane, forward-looking. It was a map of a life that was mine alone. The new arrangements were not just legal or physical. They were psychological. I was rearranging my mind, my expectations, my priorities. I finished the wine. I washed the glass. I prepared for bed in the guest bathroom. The routines were the same, but the context was entirely new. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed, in the quiet, lit house, I felt the finality of it all. The Friday operation was over. Its architects were gone. Its target had not only survived, but had taken control of the battlefield. I closed my eyes. Sleep did not come quickly, but for the first time in days, it came without the specter of dread. There was only the quiet and the vast, uncharted territory of tomorrow. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the hallway, a clean, mineral smell. I chose a color called Sea Haze, a soft gray-green that made the morning light seem to pool in the rooms. The painters had left 2 days ago. Every brushstroke was a decision Martin had no part in. The house was slowly becoming a reflection of a single mind, mine. 1 month to the day after the Friday operation, I was in the garden. It was a bright Saturday morning, and I was not alone. Sarah and Alina sat at the wrought iron table under the magnolia tree, their coffee mugs steaming. Sarah, with her close-cropped silver hair and sharp eyes, was dissecting a local political race. Alina, softer-spoken, was listening with an amused smile. We had reconnected over the past weeks, first with cautious phone calls, then with coffee, and now with this easy Saturday ritual. So I told him, if you think that's a viable policy, you haven't been listening to a word the community has said for 5 years, Sarah said, waving a hand. Honestly. Alina laughed. And what did he say? He sputtered it was glorious. Sarah turned to me. Ronnie, you should have been there. You were always better at cutting through the nonsense than anyone. I'm enjoying my retirement from nonsense, I said, pruning a spent bloom from the rose bush beside the table. The snip of the shears was a satisfying sound. How's the legal labyrinth? Alina asked, her voice gentle. Proceeding, I said. The temporary orders are in place. The divorce is filed. Elaine is a bulldog. Martin's lawyer is already negotiating a settlement. He wants it quiet and fast. I did not mention the specifics, the favorable division of assets, the buyout of his share of the house. They were numbers on paper, the cost of his exit. It's administrative now. And Cynthia? Sarah asked, no pity in her voice, just a flat curiosity. I have not heard a word. The cease and desist letter did its job. I saw Peter, her husband, at the supermarket last week. He looked the other way and hurried down the cereal aisle. I placed the dead bloom in a small basket. It's a clean break. The conversation lulled into a comfortable silence, filled with birdsong and the distant hum of a lawnmower. This was the chosen family the articles talked about. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet companionship, a mutual respect that required no performance. I've been thinking, I said, wiping my hands on my gardening apron, about the community center. They've asked me back a few times in an advisory role, but I don't want to just go back. What do you want? Alina asked. I was talking to Officer Brooks, the officer who came that day. We've exchanged a few emails. I saw their surprised looks. Purely professional. She mentioned how many calls they get that are messy, domestic disputes that are all emotion, no strategy. She said my calm was a weapon I shouldn't put down. I walked over and sat with them at the table. I was thinking of starting a group, informal, for women our age, maybe a bit younger, not a support group where we cry, a strategy group, how to organize your finances when you're alone, how to talk to lawyers, how to document things, how to keep your head clear when the world expects you to fall apart. Sarah's eyes lit up. A tactical workshop for life. Exactly. Wisdom as a practical tool. I could host it here in the living room once the paint fully cures. I'd help, Alina said immediately. I know about estate planning. I could do a session. And I, Sarah said, can teach them how to tell a bureaucrat to go to hell without raising their voice. It's a specialty. We laughed. It was a real laugh, one that came from my chest and didn't feel forced or performative. It felt like a release of old, trapped air. Later, after they left with promises to return next Saturday, I stayed in the garden. I watered the new beds I'd put in along the fence line. I checked the tomatoes. The house stood behind me, its new color windows gleaming in the sun. It was no longer just a house, or a symbol of a shared life that had curdled. It was a base of operations for whatever came next. I thought about the word vengeance. It had been my fuel for those crucial hours, but vengeance is a finite thing. It ends when the score is settled. What I felt now was not vengeance. It was reclamation. I had reclaimed my home, my sanity, my narrative. The plotters were gone, their power broken. They were living with the consequences of their own actions, in apartments and strained marriages, and that was no longer my concern. My concern was the rosemary that needed trimming. It was the structure of the mentorship program I would sketch out after dinner. It was the book on my nightstand I was eager to read. It was the quiet peace of a Saturday evening alone, which no longer felt like loneliness, but like space. I put away the gardening tools, washed my hands at the outdoor sink, and walked inside. The sea haze walls were a calm backdrop to the few pieces of art I had decided to keep. The rest were in storage, awaiting a decision or a sale. I made a simple dinner and ate at the kitchen island, listening to a jazz album I loved. As dusk fell, I turned on the lights. I moved through the rooms, not to banish shadows, but to illuminate the space I had made for myself. I felt a solid sense of rightness, a quiet pride that had nothing to do with victory over others and everything to do with integrity within myself. The Friday operation was a closed chapter, a dark story with a satisfactory ending. But my story was not over. It was, in the most real sense, just beginning. I had proven my composure could be a weapon. Now I would learn to let it be a foundation. The house was quiet, but it was no longer empty. It was full of my own potential, waiting patiently for me to decide what came next. I had all the time in the world to find out.